Okay, guys, it's just a few of us apparently today, so feel free to be more open with your questions, what you want to hear, all that good stuff. I'm really hoping that you guys find these trainings and these calls valuable. If not, again, feel free to let me know what I can do or what you're looking for even from them, and we can work on that going forward so that way we're really kind of meeting your needs versus it just being a half an hour or an hour out of the day where you can be making sales calls or something else. Before I go ahead and share my screen, I think I wanted to start with a little bit kind of about why you would do green screen, um, and then kind of what you should look for in terms of a backdrop. So we will get into the software and what you can do and all that good stuff, but I thought we should start with the basics. So why would you want to use green screen, right? Well, one, it's kind of fun, but honestly, it's endless opportunity, and no matter what the client wants, you can do it. So this is typically either a really good situation in, I know we talked the last call about mitzvahs and that type of stuff, but also if people are looking for something very specific. Um, you don't really want to do a printed backdrop of something extremely, extremely specific because that's not something that you're either going to be able, well, hopefully you can charge a ton for it, but in some cases you won't be able to. And in some cases, just the printed isn't going to come out right. So this gives you kind of a variety of looks. It gives you kind of the cheapest way to do something specific for your client. And you can really create an immersive experience with green screen for your folks. We've had some folks that have used it for, say, a movie premiere where they're really just putting their people within that scene, that movie scene, that cover, or something like that. So it's kind of a cheaper way to get across an immersive experience and something incredibly specific for what your client wants. The downside to doing a green screen event, honestly, you need some space, so you can't just get shoved in a corner like we've all seen happen. And you have to be pretty good at the lighting. If you don't do green screen correctly, it's pretty darn obvious. So that's definitely kind of a downside of green screen, is that everybody knows you don't want to be the one that shows up with green screen at a St. Patrick's Day event. So just keeping stuff like that in mind. I know, David, you said something about the lighting, so let's talk a little bit about kind of your green screen backdrops, because that can influence it as well, and then let's talk a little bit about lighting, if that's okay with you. So we have a couple of options for a green screen backdrop. And when I say we, I mean Photo Booth Solutions doesn't make them or anything. I just mean like as producers, as somebody that's going out there doing it. We as a group. The first one is going to be kind of your dyed muslin. So that one's kind of it's typically like a relatively cheap cost, cheap cost. It's usually seamless, which is one of the things, if you have a seam in your backdrop, that can be tough to remove just by lighting. But with the dyed muslin, you can usually get it in a variety of sizes and length for full body shots, all that good type of stuff. The downside to dyed muslin is that it reflects light more than like a foamed backdrop. So this one, you're definitely going to want a steamer because it's guaranteed essentially to wrinkle. So again, one of the things is to keep your wrinkles, shadows, and then seams out from us as much as you can, I guess. The other option is going to be a foamed backdrop, and these typically absorb the light a lot better than some of the other ones, and you could stretch it to eliminate the creases. It's lightweight. No, sorry, David. I was going to do a slideshow for these, but I thought I couldn't pick a bad picture. You know what I mean? I just felt bad. I could write up the content and email it to you afterwards if that would work. Well, how do you pick a bad picture? Hey, here's a picture from XYZ. This one really sucks. I can't do that. So the foam backs are typically bulky to travel with and a little expensive. So then we've also got the die-sub printed. These are not super expensive. They're typically seamless and they're lightweight. The thing with those, and then spandex that we're going to cover in a minute, which I'm just going to kind of lump in here, is if you stretch them, they can get a little see-through and a little weird. So that's something to keep in mind with those. Let's see. They're all sleeping right now. I'm sure you'll hear them in a little bit, though, when the UPS guy goes by. So the lighting options, that's what we all want to hear about, right? So ideally, you want to light your subject and the background with two separate pools of light. So ideally, we don't want any shadows of the subject. So if you can get lights that you can mount on top of your green screen, kind of angle that down, that would be ideal. Frankly, in a lot of cases, that's not going to happen. So you can use kind of the soft and diffused light that I know a lot of you kind of have seen. It's been around. That produces kind of a soft shadow. So if you're lighting your people with the umbrella light that's diffusing it, it's going to kind of reduce your hot spot and that reflective green cast that you can sometimes get when somebody who's tilting their face to one side, they're looking to one side and their cheek is a little green and a little transparent at the end of the day. That kind of diffused light is going to get rid of a bit of that if you're lighting them head on. Again, if you have an option to light them from the top and you can do kind of a honeycomb grid to kind of diffuse that light and direct it back into your green screen background, that's going to give you a really good kind of lighting on the backdrop, so that way you could remove those shadows. Again, you want to keep kind of your subject and your screen equally lit, so that way, again, there's no shadows. So ideally, lighting is the best, kind of best way to get rid of the shadows. The other option is to have your guests really close to the screen. So if they stand right in front of it, there's really no room for kind of shadow behind them to hit the screen. So that's another option. I know we talked about exposing your subject first. So you want to get the light on them and make sure that they're lighted properly, because you always want those photos to come out right. You want them to look good and not overexposed and bright white, everything shining off their face. And then you want to light the backdrop. So you want to get your people first and then try and get that backdrop nicely done. David, I haven't seen a kind of like standalone kit for a booth. I think everybody kind of has different preferences, to be honest with you. We see some people that use just a light on the top of their green screen that's shooting down and maybe an umbrella to the side. We see some people that have bright LEDs right up front that you can see in some slow-mo stuff. And then we have some people that are okay just using that ring light off of their booth or no light even. So it really depends on kind of your booth setup and what you're looking for and what your client's looking for. So at a wedding, I don't know if I'd go with, 6 lights to light the green screen. You can. I mean, I'm sure those turn out fabulous, but standing kind of in the background might not look so great at the venue. In fact, my mother-in-law's wedding, when we went to that, they had a booth there that was not us. We just showed up and there was a booth there. And it was a very, very, very bright light that you could see across the dance floor. You know, the tables were on the other side of the dance floor and you could still see it. It was, you couldn't even look at that side of the table because that light was that bright. So I wouldn't recommend something like that. David, what type of scaling are you thinking of? While David is typing up that question, let me see if I can pull our Facebook channel, or sorry, our YouTube channel up real quick. Oh, yep. So if you can get them closer, so if their back is closer to the backdrop, I know in a typical backdrop situation, you really don't want them right on top of the backdrop. But if you don't have a great lighting solution, say you were supposed to be in a particular spot, you tested this, you know, the week before and it was great. You know, once you really get there that day, they might come in and be like, oh no, it turns out that spot doesn't work. We're going to shove you here in this corner. So something like that, I think you could probably just have that move closer to the backdrop and see if that'll work. Honestly, with green screen, some of it is just playing. It really varies based on your backdrop, on your lighting, if your lights are brand new or if they're a little bit older and maybe not as bright. Okay, that happened with the old light bulbs, let's be honest here. That's probably not something that happens anymore. But it's something that can influence it at some point, I would think. Um, so just stuff like that, it can really make a difference in what you're seeing. So unfortunately, some of it is just playing. Does anybody else have any questions kind of on the lighting, on your background options, that type of stuff before we move on to what we can do? Sure. So when you're looking at the green screen, so you've got your stuff up, you're kind of playing with it a little bit. You've still got a little bit of, say it's pulling out blonde hair, or you're getting a little shadow around their face where it's pulling out. Honestly, the easiest way to get rid of that is going to be your minimum and maximum tolerances. So what that's going to do, essentially, is the software is looking for the chroma key green. So that's going to be this 135, 255, 120. So it's going to be looking for that particular green color and pulling that out. So if you test, I mean, when I test green screen and I play with it, I use like a green file folder, or I think I've got origami paper around here somewhere. So I just pull whatever green I have around. I've used um, um, even a candy wrapper at one point, like a sucker candy wrapper that I use. But when you get to an event, what it's going to be pulling up is going to be this custom color code. So it's going to be looking for that. The minimum and maximum tolerances are essentially telling it how far off from that green it can go. So right now you can see mine's 0.01 and 0.4. So that's pretty big. If you're getting to the point where it's pulling out kind of facial colors, or if somebody's got a blue shirt on and it's pulling out a little bit of that, you can tighten up those tolerances. So maybe it's 0.3 instead of 0.4. So it's not looking for kind of as different of a green. if you're getting to the point where it's getting really tough to kind of dial in those numbers, the blur and expand edges is going to be kind of where you're going to go next. So what that's going to tell it to do is X pixels between where you think you should be done pulling it out and where it should stop. You can kind of blur that in a little bit. It's almost like a Photoshop blur. So it's going to kind of be a little flexible there on the end, around people, around their faces, that type of stuff. Does that help, Paul? Clothing issues is kind of different based on what you're looking at. If you have like a dark green dress that's reflective, that's probably not going to be the best thing to take a picture of, if you know what I mean. But for most things, I don't think we've had any big problems. What are you thinking of? While David's typing, because I typically cut him off when he's typing. Another thing you can look at is the white balance on your camera. So it can vary a little bit based on your type of light. So we've got, even our LED bulbs in our house, some of them are daylight, some of them are blue light, or I don't know. My husband loves them. I don't understand it. I don't care, frankly, in our house. But flashlight or daylight are kind of really good ones to go for lighting for this purpose, is what he gave me based on the note that you just shoved in front of my face. David, you can do any color backdrop. So if you want to do a blue backdrop or a pink backdrop, all you would do is check the box for use a custom color and switch out the red, green, blue values. I hope I just made your day. I did, didn't I? Right? Tell me. Goodbye. Okay, I'm just kidding. So let's talk kind of a bit about what we can do. So now that we've got everything down, we've got great lighting, we've got a great backdrop, we know exactly what we want to do. We can do a few things in the software. I don't know if you've heard, but we can do a few things. So we do have just I don't want to say basic green screen removal, because it's actually not basic. It's actually a little tough to do on our end, at least. For you, it's a checkbox. For us, it's a little tough to do. But you'll check it, and it'll remove anything within that green color range that we were talking about, and put in the backdrop that you tell it to. So with that, you've got a few options. You can have, if you just have one backdrop in the folder, that's the backdrop that it's going to use for everything. If you have multiple backdrops in the folder and want to use multiple backdrops, you can give the client the choice of a backdrop for their entire session. So 3, 4, 18 photos, 8, I lied, 8, not 18. For all of the photos, you can give them the choice of a background for each photo. So each time it runs through, so they'll hit start, pick a backdrop, it'll take a folder, they go back to the screen, they touch the next one. They can go up there and choose it for each of the photos. You can also set it to auto cycle the backdrops. So if you have, say, 5 backdrops in that folder, it'll use each of the backdrops. Say for photo 1, it'll use backdrop 1. For photo 2, it'll use 2. All the way through photo 6, it'll go back to number 1. Photo 7, it'll go back to number 2. So it's just going to cycle through those backdrops over and over again for you. Now, with that being said, you can also set it up so that there's an overlay that's applicable to each of those backdrops. So you would set it up as backdrop 1, your overlay would be backdrop 1-overlay. Those are going to be PNGs, because you want them, they're going to go over the people, so they need some transparency. So those are always going to be kind of your PNG version, and then your background's going to be JPEGs. Sorry, David, I think I missed where your question came in, or what visible to the guest, the backdrops when they select them, or? So if you're auto cycling through the backdrops, it's going to pull up on the screen, so that green screen removal is always going to be on the screen so they can see what they're posing in front of. So it's going to count down, it's going to take the photo with the one on the screen that they're going to pose with. And then once it moves to the next one, that's going to pop up on the screen for them to pose with. Does anybody else have any questions kind of on the ways you could make the backgrounds work? For the minimum tolerance, you never want to go less than 0, and you always want it to be less than the maximum, and then the maximum you can go up to 1. I think it's 0.99, but that's going to remove far too much than what you're looking for. Okay, cool. So we just talked about how the background that your guests select is going to show up behind them for them to pose in front of. If for some reason that's not working out for you, whether it could be something with the camera, it's not showing up right, maybe it's using too much processing power for your computer, you can either shut it down in DSLR mode. So if you're using just a Rebel or a DSLR camera, you can stop that, and then they'll just see that green background. Or you can use a webcam as well. So if you want the webcam to do kind of that removal of the green screen and show in the live view, that can also take a little bit less processing power. So that's an option for you here. A couple of the cool things, I was going to say one of the cool things, but that's not really right. We have a couple. Is the scale and place green screen. Now, I know we talked about this on the walkthrough part 2. So this is where you can actually shrink down your people, so what the photo itself is going to take. So it's still going to take the full-size photo for you. So your original folder will still have that full photo, so you can print it. You know, if you want to blow it up, you're more than welcome to. It's still going to be that regular photo size. What this is going to do, though, is on the printer in the kind of a scene that you're creating, it's going to scale down your people. I don't know if any of you guys were at the Photo Booth Expo in Vegas. If you were, raise your hand and visited us. Raise your hand over there. We used, it was a hot air balloon idea. So we had the hot air balloon as the overlay, and then in the background we had it on the ground, and then we had trees, and then we had the sky. So it looked like the hot air balloon was actually moving. But what we did was shrink the people down, I think it was to 28%, to actually put them in that hot air balloon. It's a very, very cool thing. If you guys kind of in the chat want to brainstorm a little bit on how you could use it, or kind of stuff that you could use it for, I think that's really cool. I'd love to get you guys kind of sharing ideas and stuff. But it's actually like shrinking them down in the photo. It does turn out into a really cool scene. We've seen some of our people have used the minions from Despicable Me, and they've taken the photo and shrunk people down so that they're kind of minion size and put them in in the scene with them. Yes, Paul. So you would position the photo because what it's going to look like is basically just kind of a square in the middle of your backdrop in your background file. So you want to move them right into position. So you would set it as a scale of say 28%, and then your X and Y would I want to move them to the left 800 pixels and down 600. So you're actually going to position them just right. So some of the stuff we've been throwing around for maybe at the expo next year is people getting chased by like a T-Rex. So you're shrinking them down really tiny compared to the T-Rex. So something like that. So the other kind of cool new one, you can see I'm kind of rubbing my hands over here. I'm all excited about this one. Is interactive shot. So what this one's going to do is they're going to either have their backdrop or select their backdrop for the first photo. It's going to take the picture, and then it's going to use that backdrop for the second photo. So they will be posing with themselves. If you set it up for more than two, it will then use that photo with two of them for the third photo. So it's going to always use that previous shot's backdrop or for the background. Yep, David, if I don't know, maybe you guys are not as nerdy as me, or maybe you're more nerdy than me, but like they used to do photos with, it was actually kind of a scam at the time, with a double exposure, and it would be like it looked like a ghostly image of somebody putting their hand on somebody that was living. A really good example is one of like Lincoln having his hand on somebody's shoulder, and it was all that double exposure stuff. But it's kind of reminiscent of that in my mind. I think it's really fun. If you guys have some cool ideas other than like the creepy old scam, that would be great. Let me know. I know that's not the best example, so. Okay, so we've gone through kind of the stuff that's easily on the screen right here. The other one we're going to talk about is an animated background, so the animated GIF. Again, I know it's the GIF thing. I'm going with GIF. Roll with me on it. Um, so in this one, we have two photos, and then I think there's 16 background images behind them. So there would be 8 behind each of the photos. So what it's doing is your print, so that like actual print that you're going to print out for them, is going to have whatever background they select. The animation that they can then share, it's going to pull those backgrounds out and plop in kind of the animated background that you told it to. So I know we talked about this a little bit on, well, quite a bit on the animated GIF call. So we went over kind of the details on how to get those screen grabs and what you need for the background. But I did want to point it out kind of on the green screen call today too, because you do need that green screen removal in order to be able to make them work. So I don't want to take you guys over time. I was planning on 4 to 4:30. If you have a couple questions, I'm happy to stick around. But for those of you that kind of want to hop off, feel free. I don't know if we have these gifts available, but I know for sure this top one, you do have the backgrounds in your assets folder. So if you go to C, Program Files, Photo Booth Solutions, Social Booth Assets, and then GIF backgrounds, I know you have the dance files there. I'll just plop that right there for you too. You do also have a couple of animated overlays if you want to play with those. Um, so we've got some dancing Christmas lights in here, a spider walking over the screen, that type of stuff. Yes, Paul, they should be up on our YouTube channel. If they are not, shoot me a note and I can upload them real quick for you. Anything else, you guys?